And welcome back in, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King. The first roundtable of the season is here. Of course, we'll have this every Thursday for you guys, just like we have the past few years, looking ahead to Auburn's opponent on Saturday with Jason Caldwell and Philip Marshall. If you're watching this on YouTube, consuming it in video form, shout out to our intern, Patrick Bingham, who was on here like 2 minutes before we got rolling to fix the setup here. But looks fantastic. Looks really, really good. You got a ticker of games there at the bottom running through the whole weekend. And so Patrick will be our intern this semester running social and video because he's way better at this stuff than we are and actually knows how to do it. And we do not. So it looks fantastic. Shout out to Patrick. But guys, it's finally time for some Auburn football. I am very excited to stop talking about what could be and instead get some actual data on the field. Jason, though, you and I talked about it multiple times this preseason, the amount of access we've had, the amount of times we've been at the building, we feel like we know this team pretty darn well, all the way down to, I mean, I could probably get 20 out of 22, maybe 21 out of 22 of the starters that are going to be on Saturday. That D-line might throw me for a wrench, but there is just no replacement for what the coaches are about to get on film Saturday and their ability to break that down as compared to a month of practice.
Yeah, they're just, we saw it with Florida State. Even coaches, and Hugh Freeze said it himself, even coaches, you don't really know because there's so many new players on everybody's roster. You just don't know what it's going to look like until you get out there and actually start playing football. You think this guy's going to be good, but you don't really know. It's not like, it used to be 20 years ago where you've had a guy on campus for 2 years and you've seen him play and you've watched him develop and you've seen it. This is not those days don't happen much anymore. For Auburn, you hope they do. And you hope you have this freshman class on campus for a few more years and watch them grow and develop. But you're depending on a bunch of transfers who played football, but they haven't played football for you. And so there's still a lot of unknown, even though we do know a lot about this team. We still don't know exactly what it's going to look like when they start playing actual football. You're still muted, Nathan, I think. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Philip, you've written about it multiple times this preseason, and we've talked about it. There's sometimes not a lot you can get from a game like this, especially when you'll be playing a bunch of backups in the second half. But sometimes there are a lot of things you can tell on tape, regardless of who you're playing. In your experience, these types of games take a lot of different forms sometimes. But what do you think, looking at Hugh Freeze and this staff, is the biggest thing they want to get out of week one, going into week two, where they're already going to play a Power 4 team in week two? That'll be much
it's kind of hard to say. I mean, as I wrote about, I saw a post on Twitter, and I refuse to call it anything else. That somebody wondering how many touchdowns we have to score to feel good about the offense. Well, they scored 8 touchdowns against UMass last year in the first game. So, I mean, that was obviously about as good as you could hope for, but it didn't really predict where the season was headed. And I think the opposite can be true. I think that you can not necessarily look so good, and that doesn't have any isn't a predictor of what is to come either. I would say what they want to get out of it is they want to see all those you guys play. You want to see, I think everybody's looking forward to seeing Cam Coleman play, and and see how much Peyton Thorne has improved, as we've been told over and over. But I'm just not sure that it'll be a step if those things happen in this game. If Peyton is really sharp and making good decisions, but I think those are the big things. Kind of like I don't want to belittle Alabama A&M, because Alabama A&M does have some players. They got some athletes, and they'll probably be able to give Auburn some problems from time to time. but it's like a scrimmage in that what you really want to see is execution and people being where they're supposed to be and doing what they're supposed to do, and the quarterback getting the ball in the right places. And if you do those things, then you're probably going to win like they won last year. Because in the end, I mean, look, if you were just wanting to see, if you were just saying, okay, we don't care about those things, we just care about winning, you could just probably go out there and run the ball 70 times and win pretty handily. But you wouldn't get much out of doing that. So I think the first games are different. I mean, we all saw one game for sure last year when Auburn was just woefully unprepared to play, and but I don't think that happens very often in first games because they're just excited. They're excited to be back out there and finally play somebody else. But I'm as much as anything looking forward to seeing the defense, which I think is going to be somewhat different than what we've seen in the past few years. And the other thing is, you got 5 new coaches? Am I right about that? All those guys are going to be working a game together for the first time. Now, you've done mock games and all that stuff, but it's still different. So,
new coaches, helmet communication.
right.
There are lots of things that you're right that you have to deal with in this one, and try to figure out how everything works.
Right. Now, like helmet communication, as you mentioned, I mean, you can test that against Alabama A&M as well as against anybody. I mean, if it was flipped, if it was California out there, it'd still be the same. I mean, that's kind of like kickers. Kickers making a 50-yard field goal is hard, regardless of who's on the other side. So, but I think there's going to be a lot of interesting things to watch. How they deal with offensive line, particularly the left side of the offensive line, what they're going to do, and all new faces. I mean, like I said, I in fact, I posted a link on the message board. 63% of the starting quarterbacks in the Power 4 this season are transfers. 63%. Not necessarily new transfers. I mean, Peyton Thorne's a transfer, but did not start their careers where they're playing now. And that is the most striking part of the new era. I mean, that used to be not only not 63%, but probably not 3%.
Yeah,
so it's going to be interesting, and everybody wants to see these new receivers. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I mean, not just Cam Coleman, but all of them, because they're almost, with 2 or 3 exceptions, they're all new. Either transfers or true freshmen.
Yep. Yeah, something me and Jason talked about this week is, the execute. We'll talk about that later, but the execution from that group, I think, will be key. And that's what Freeze has talked about, because like you said, Philip, it's not just the young guys. Like, there are only 2 returning scholarship players at that position. And they're experienced guys, Lambert Smith and Robert Lewis. Like, they'll have it just fine. That's why they brought them in. But that's another reason you put that stuff on tape. That's another reason, like you said, Philip, you don't just run the ball every play, because you need to get some useful reps out of this one. Jason, you had a preview as we record this here on Thursday morning of Alabama A&M, their personnel, what to expect from them. We saw them name their starting quarterback this week. You and I were talking about that. A little bit of a surprise to me, but he's a guy that you've seen in person already. Tell us a little bit about what Auburn fans can expect from Alabama A&M on both sides of the ball Saturday.
Yeah, Cornelius Brown, Quad Brown, from Calera. Saw him play in high school. Long, athletic. He's a guy that threw for over 2,000 yards and like 17 touchdowns at Georgia State. Left and went to UT Martin. Was at Alabama A&M last year and had an injury and only played in a couple of games, and so probably would have been their starter last year had that not occurred. And so he's a guy that is now projected to be their starter heading into this one. And he's a guy that hey, he played since COVID. This is a guy that's 23 years old. He's not going to be fazed by playing in this atmosphere. And so I think you look at him as a guy to watch. I mean, running back, they got a couple of guys back, Donovan Eaglin and Ryan Morrow combined for about 1,200 yards last year. Ryan Morrow's a kid from Maplesville. Got connections, and I'm guessing related to Harold Morrow that played at Auburn. So this probably be a pretty big game for him, considering his family's probably a bunch of Auburn folks in his family from Maplesville. But I think transfers. That's the thing you look at. Like they don't have a ton of seniors, but they got a lot of older players that have played football at a higher level, or at least practiced and been part of football at a higher level. And so, you start looking at them. Jacoby Hewitt and Keenan Hambrick are two receivers that combined for about almost 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns last year on offense. And so those are guys. And then, I think secondary is kind of the thing to watch for them. They got a couple of guys that have played a lot of football up front. Jamarian Ellis is an undersized pass rusher, kind of a Jamonta Waller kind of guy that's pretty good. That'll be fun. But then maybe the guy to watch, period, is Carson Benson. They got an offensive tackle that could be like a Senior Bowl guy. We've seen guys from lower classifications make Senior Bowl and then get drafted. Carson Benson is the guy that could potentially be that guy. He's a left tackle for them, 6'6", 305. Can continue to develop and stayed at Alabama A&M, and is a guy that's on the radar of NFL teams. And so interesting group. They got a transfer offensive lineman from Minnesota, 6'7", 355. So they'll have a little size up front on the offensive line. But I think you look at it, and lots of guys who probably said, hey, I need to transfer down if I want to play more, and it's worked out for them. And so guys that have some talent, but the depth and the size, especially on front on the defensive line, is probably the biggest thing. They don't have a ton of size on the defensive front, not real big. And so that'll be the thing. Auburn should be able to control the line of scrimmage, especially on offense.
Yeah, Philip, you talked about it. This team's ability to run the ball, I think, it's a good thing that it's become such an afterthought, because that means they're really good at it. Obviously, Jarquez is the top returning rusher in the SEC, but Derek Nix said it last week when people were, when we asked him what the biggest difference in the offense needs to be, and he channeled a little bit of Pat Dye. Philip, he said, we need to be able to run the ball when people are expecting to run the ball, and so. I agree with you. I don't think they're just going to pound away this entire game. You've got to get, good passing reps on tape. But I think this will be our first taste here of a team that Auburn should be able, like Jason said, control the line of scrimmage and let these running backs shine a little bit, because that element of this offense has taken a back seat this offseason, which is understandable. The new receivers, the new passing game, that's a huge storyline. But at the end of the day, if we're looking up at the end of the year and Auburn has won 8 or 9 games, it is probably because this running game has been really, really good.
Yeah, I don't think, as much as the game has changed, unless you're just an all-out air raid team like Mike Leach's offense, you still need to run the ball to win. You need to control the line of scrimmage. I mean, we watched Georgia Tech beat Florida State last week because they controlled the line of scrimmage. And even in this days of getting the ball to players in space and all those things, controlling the line of scrimmage is still how you win. And clearly that's probably the biggest difference between the two levels. I mean, FCS teams, Group of 5 teams, they can get fast, athletic guys, but it's hard to get those linemen, particularly defensive linemen, and which is what I think has really separated the SEC more than anything else in recent years, is that they have those guys, and looks like Auburn might have some of those guys. That's another thing that's going to be interesting to see, because going into the spring, I thought my biggest question was whether they'd be able to put together an SEC caliber defensive line, and it appears at this point that they have. Now we'll see, but we probably won't see Saturday but we'll see starting next week. But at the same time, obviously, you can't overlook anybody. Auburn should have lost to Jacksonville State in 2015. I mean, they won. They didn't deserve to win. They should have lost to Georgia State a few years ago. And I was remembering in 2017, which was clearly a very good team, they played Mercer and they turned the ball over 5 times, and they had to put the game away in the second half of the fourth quarter. So if you do that, if you go out there and start turning the ball over a bunch,
no matter how much more of a talent advantage you have, right, if you turn it over a bunch,
you can get yourself in trouble against anybody.
Correct.
And then that other team starts thinking, we can win. And you got a fight on your hands. I don't expect that. And I mean, that Jacksonville State team, for instance, I mean, they played for the SES National Championship. They had a bunch of Division 1A or FBS Power 5 transfers, including a couple from Auburn. And so I never thought they'd play Jacksonville State again after that, but I guess they're going to. What, next year is it? Or the year after?
I think it might be next year. I don't know. I talked to their AD after that news was announced, and I still can't remember it. But
I don't know. It comes down to, you think about this game, and it's you're going to have more talented players. You're going to have more of them. You have to go and execute, and you're talking about like, kind of how engaged you are. And you're right. In first games, you're going to be engaged.
Yeah.
Later in the season, we saw it last year, Mexico State. It has nothing to do with coaching preparation. They prepare guys the same way each week. You're going to have games where you just aren't engaged. It's just going to happen. That's just the nature of the beast. That doesn't normally happen in week 1. And
right.
And so, you got guys ready to play, especially when you're playing so many young guys. The problem may be keeping them from being too hyped up Saturday at 2:00 instead of getting to 6:30.
Yeah, another thing that's going to be interesting to watch is when, assuming they get the game under control in the first half, some of these other guys play that we haven't heard as much about. I'm looking forward to seeing Hank Brown, who I'm doing kind of an in-depth piece on, play. And I think I'm guessing they would like to play all 3 quarterbacks, because from what he told me after the press conference on Monday, he said that there was very, very little difference between Hank Brown and Holden Gardner. So, I mean, I think that's going to be, from Hank Brown's standpoint, he's going to have to keep working to keep his place in the pecking order. So, there's always a lot of interesting things in first games, and regardless of the opponent. And so it'll be interesting to watch. As I said, I do think that Alabama A&M, particularly on offense, will have enough players to maybe score a little bit. Score 7, 10, 14 points probably. And then you get into whether, they might not be able to score against the first defense, but then you get into the second defense, and they may be able to score more, and it may not look as pretty as the fans want it to look. But that's I've seen one of two things usually happens in these games. It's either just a blowout like the UMass game last year that's not competitive, or the better team kind of plays down to the level of the weaker team, and it's just really boring. One of the two usually.
Jason, what is one? I think we've pretty much touched on all of them so far. One position group or one area on the field that you are going to be keeping your eye on Saturday? See how they execute, see how young guys perform. What's a group you're eager to see now that the preseason has concluded and we've been hearing about these guys for the last month?
Yeah, I don't know. It's probably going to be the secondary a little bit. I think the offensive line is what we expect it to be. I think we expect to see Tyler Johnson, Dylan Wade, and heck, we might see Percy Lewis at left tackle too. But I think we're going to see a couple of combinations of those guys. But the rest of the line is stable, and I think it's just a matter of kind of getting on film and trying to find your best five. The secondary group, I don't know that we'll see Keontae Scott a ton, even though he's back practicing. He's dealt with a hamstring. Get him some reps, make sure he's good to go, and knock some of the rust off, and then let Antonio Kite and J.C. Hart play. I think that group, I mean, even at safety, you have Bug Thompson, who's a transfer from Texas. Caleb Wooden's your most experienced guy in terms of Auburn experience, and he ain't played a ton. But then you got a bunch of young guys at safety, a lot of young guys at corner. Just getting those guys on the field, I think. Hey, go out there and run. You'll face a team that'll probably sling it around a little bit, and so I think that group for me, they're athletic and they're long. Just a matter of going out there and getting some seasoning and get. So that's probably the group I'll be kind of more anxious to see the most.
Yeah, and they'll be ready. They'll be ready to go out there. I mean, talking to Champ Anthony this week, he said, I think somebody sort of reminded him that it was 6:30, and he was like, "Man, that kind of ruined my day." I was like, "I'm gonna have to wait all the way until nighttime to get ready to hit somebody." Philip, what about you? Is it your guy Hank Brown? Who are you kind of looking forward to after talking to these players for a few weeks, seeing on the field?
He would be one. I think maybe I think I'm going to make the easy pick and say the wide receivers, because that was such a problem area last year that I think that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes Peyton Thorne got a bum route when he had a bunch of passes dropped, but what you don't see from the stands or from the press box or wherever is if he's going back there thinking the receiver is going to be one place and then he's not there. That's a big problem.
Yeah, and it's funny because this week we were on the practice field and I had a staffer come up to me and said, "Hey, we didn't win one 50-50 ball last year." And I went, "No," and you dropped a bunch of 100-0 balls too. And I mean, you think about it. Think about one play like that where it's 2nd and 7, and you have a first down completion that's dropped. All of a sudden, 3rd down, you're behind the chains. They put their pass rush group in. You can't convert and you punt. Or you might have had a 25-yard gain. Now you're in scoring position. One play like that can change an entire drive. And they had a bunch of those plays last year.
There's no doubt.
He wasn't perfect, but he was probably better than the numbers showed.
And you're right in that there's nobody where you could just say, okay, it's 3rd and whatever, and I'm just going to throw it up there because I think my guy can make a play.
Yeah, I mean, Rivaldo Fairweather was the one guy, and after about week 3, team said, well, look, we're going to make sure that guy doesn't do it. And he still caught the balls, but they didn't have to go, hey, we better go bracket this outside receiver because this guy's killing us. Now you're going to have to balance out your coverage in the secondary and your defense and do some different things. And you win one-on-one balls in this offense, that's the key because that's what they're looking for. When they run the RPO, they're looking for a one-on-one shot, take a shot, and go make a play. And they did not make those plays last year.
No, they did not. And you're right about. I think it's going to be great for Rivaldo Fairweather to do that he's going to have players on the outside who can make plays because people not. It's when all you got to do to stop the passing games is cover the tight end. That's not a recipe for success.
Not for the offense, anyway. It is for the defense. It's not, no, and I thought about it. I kind of changed my mind a little bit. I think Rivaldo may be my MVP of this team because I think he's a guy. I mean, just think, instead of having to play 60 snaps, you can play him 40 snaps and get 7 or 8 touches where he's single coverage in the middle of the field. That's a guy that could end up catching 50 passes and have 700-800 yards and 10 touchdowns. I mean, like, he could legit have those types of numbers because of what's outside in this offense.
Hughes' offenses at Ole Miss, the tight end was always a significant.
Evan Ingram was the guy, and that's the guy you kind of go, hey, if you can have one of those types of years, that'd be huge.
Yeah, and it's so clear from like practice even. I know they still have those new weapons, but that doesn't go away, the connection that Thorne had with Fairweather. Just watching when stuff breaks down, like, he's still looking for that guy. I know he has Cam Coleman now. I know he has, Lambert Smith and Sam Jackson and Robert Lewis, but like, it's you don't have the connection and the rapport that they had last year, and that suddenly goes away just because I still think you'll see a lot of under duress 7 yards over the middle to Rivaldo Fairweather. Like, that is still going to be a part of this offense. Yeah, I mean, I always think back, Jason, to the Vanderbilt game. I cannot remember the specifics of Camden Brown's play. I know he had a big drop. Amari Kelly certainly had a touchdown that he dropped in that game. I believe Rivaldo dropped the pass there too. And so this is not to just, excuse a lot of the issues they had in the passing game last year, but, let's say, like you're talking about, let's say those 3 passes are completed. I think that's probably like $150 and 2 more touchdowns for Peyton Thorne, which would have been a nice bump for his numbers last year. I'm with you, Philip. The execution of those receivers will be key in this first game. I'm excited to see them against some worn down Alabama A&M defenders. I think somebody like Malcolm Simmons could be dangerous on some sweeps. Somebody like Bryce Kane catching a slant over the middle. If he breaks one tackle, that is not somebody that the speed of which Alabama A&M is used to tackling in the open field. Of course, Perry Thompson. We saw Hank Brown in the preseason look for Perry Thompson down the field. Like, Hank Brown got this job as the backup because of his deep ball passing in large part, and so maybe he'll uncork a couple there in the second half. I think you'll see those young receivers make some plays this game. Cam Coleman is one that will do it, I think, all season, but this is a good opportunity for the others. My position group that I'll be watching, I think, is just that front 7 and probably the front 7 in the second half. Like, it'll be fun to watch the rotation, but as we referenced earlier, I'm excited to see. I just haven't personally, in my time covering the team, seen this much young talent in the front 7. What does Amaris Williams look like? What does DeMarcus Riddick look like? What does Jamonte Waller look like? DJ Barber. I was talking to somebody the other day. What is the player that Alabama A&M wants to see the least in the fourth quarter? And this person said, probably DJ Barber coming through a hole to hit the running back with 6 minutes left in the game. Doesn't sound enjoyable. So I just think, like you said, Jason, if they can channel that energy properly, I know they're going to be hyped up, but those are some guys I think Auburn could get a couple turnovers in the second half, because these are really, really talented young guys. They'll be in the wrong spots. They'll do the wrong things. They're freshmen. But when they're able to play just based off instincts, which you can on defense a lot of the time, I think you'll see guys like Amaris and DeMarcus Riddick. I think you'll see them make some plays here in the second half and probably throughout the season, but more opportunities in this game.
I think the other one for me, it's no secret. I've talked about the defensive line for a long time. I think they've got a lot of guys. Interior, can you find a guy that goes out there and says, "Okay, I'm the dog in this group, and I'm fixing to take over"? That's the thing I'm still waiting to see. Is it Isaiah Rakes? Is it Bobby Jameson Travis? Is it Philip Bleedy? Is it Malik Autry coming in as a true freshman? I mean, who can you find that becomes a playmaker for this group? Because I think you've got a lot of guys that can play, but the difference between a lot of guys that can play and somebody who says, "Hey, I'm fixing to whip this guy in front of me," those are two different things. Because I think outside, Keldrick, Amaris Williams, look on the other side, and you got Jalen McLeod, brought in Kieron Crawford, you got Jamonte Waller, Joe Phillips. I mean, I think they've got guys outside that fit the mold of what you're looking for. Inside, can you find somebody that says, "Okay, I'm going to take this. I'm going to stop this. I'm going to destroy this play"? Those are the things I think in this game and against Alabama A&M, you better have somebody that can do those kind of things.
The thing is, I think a lot of times people, they see a running back break wide open and run a long way, and they say, "Well, my team got whipped at the line of scrimmage." that's not always the case. More often, in fact, it's that somebody wasn't in the right place, or that somebody didn't fit the right gap. And
alignment issues are usually the ones that, especially when you play a bunch of folks, that can come up to bite you early in the season.
Yeah, this is usually moving forward when they play bigger games. We'll spend this time to make our predictions. We'll still have our predictions in the Fearless Forecasters on Friday morning, but we've sort of gone over that at this point. What we expect to see, I think all of us will have Auburn handily in this game.
What about the game you're most anxious to see this weekend?
Yeah,
there's some really
good, interesting games.
Yeah, and I don't know which one it is. For me, Auburn doesn't play Florida, but the Florida-Miami game is really intriguing because whoever loses that game, it has some serious issues, especially if it's Florida because of their schedule.
Right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one very much so. I'm looking forward to the Georgia Clemson game in Atlanta. I heard a Georgia reporter on the radio the other day talking about that, and I wasn't aware of this, that they sell licenses at Mercedes-Benz Stadium where you can buy this and you can have you have the ability to buy a certain number of tickets to any event they have there, including the Falcons, the SEC championship game, Georgia, whatever. And so as a result, lots of those tickets are bought up by Georgia people. And so it's just almost impossible for Clemson. Clemson's not far away, but as well as they travel, they'll still be outnumbered significantly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, Georgia's offense should be really good defensively. They've got pieces, but they got to replace a bunch of guys. The Clemson defensive front's going to be good. Can they score? Right. And can they score enough? That's the thing I still have questions about.
And Georgia's really banged up at running back, so that could be a factor.
LSU USC is going to be interesting too.
Yeah, I said this week on radio, you could tell me any of like 7 different things that happened in this game, and I can go, yeah, I can believe that. Both teams can win by 21. It could be a close game. They could score 40. They could score 14. I have no clue.
Notre Dame, Texas A&M, similar. At Texas A&M, that'll be interesting.
I like that. There's really good football games right out of the gate.
This is completely changing the subject, but you talked early on in camp about trying to balance getting the physical work you need and protecting players. And I just happened to see a story where the Charlotte coach, who was a first-year coach, said he had been a failure in the preseason because they have 9 starters who won't play the first game. 9.
Yeah, it's the ultimate balancing act. Because you're right. It's like how much do you hit? You have to be physical, but when guys go on the ground and roll around is when trouble occurs. And so I don't know that there's any coach in the country that say, well, I feel really good about our tackling, because they just don't know. They don't know.
Exactly.
You try to prepare them as much as possible, and then say, hey, then go get them on the ground on Saturday.
I wonder if this applies as well. Surely not, Philip, but the national championship game is in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So I don't know if they can buy those tickets up. It'd be a safe bet for them to do that. I don't know if that's
according to what this guy said. These ticket licenses, I don't know how many of them are available, but these ticket licenses give you the right to buy tickets to any football game played there. Whether that includes the national championship game, I don't know.
Yeah. I think I like Nussmeier a lot. I think he can sort of continue that trend of what they've been doing in the passing game at LSU. Not to the level of Jaden Daniels, of course, but I think he's set up for success. USC changing defensive coordinators. I mean, Lincoln Riley already doesn't know how to coach defense. So we'll kind of see how that goes, especially at the line of scrimmage. Yeah, I wonder about A&M and Florida this week. I don't think A&M I think is better than Florida for sure. But they play teams that are probably a good bit better than them on the whole, but they play them at home. That's my thing about this week. Everybody's going to be jazzed up.
I'm not yet convinced that Miami is all that. I
mean, I picked Florida. I'm just not sold. That's the thing. And I'm not sold on Florida either.
No, definitely not.
And so that's it. That's the thing. We just don't know. Like Cam Ward, everybody said, "Hey, this guy's a Heisman Trophy, all this stuff." Well, they went 6-7 last year at Washington State. So
right,
you got to go do it at some point. And hey, the interesting thing about Auburn, and it kind of fits that too, is that you look at success for transfer quarterbacks, and almost exclusively it's come in year 2.
Yeah.
Peyton Thorne's in year 2. Joe Burrow was year 2. We saw Jaden Daniels in year 2. Now, USC, he was the kind of the outlier because they hit the ground running and he played really well, but it was the same coach and the same offense. And so that helped a little bit there.
You say Jaden Daniels?
Yeah. I said Jaden Daniels. Yeah. I mean, like almost exclusively.
Right.
Bo had
Jaden Daniels play at Auburn in his first season.
It's okay.
8 of 20.
Should have lost.
Yeah. But I mean, Bo in year 2 at Oregon was significantly better. He was good and he played a lot of football. I think you look at like a guy like Cam Ward and you go, third school, third different system, first year at Miami, different world, completely. I mean, like, I don't know. It's really interesting. That's why I think about Peyton Thorne going, man, your 2 guys have made a significant jump. And if he makes a significant jump, then it changes everything for this Auburn team.
What have been some of y'all's favorite season openers in your time around Auburn? Obviously, most of them on this list are probably going to be big name opponents. But just going back through the years, what are some memories that you guys hold on first games for Auburn that were good ones?
I wasn't working yet, but when I was still in school, like Auburn, I was at Auburn, Texas, 1987. It was hot as blue blazes, and they came in and Auburn played really well. 87. So that's when I remember. Again, I was in school, but Georgia Southern, 1992, was one that Auburn had to fight and hold on to at the end.
Georgia Southern was ahead 17-0.
Yes, and Auburn had to make a valiant comeback to win that game. And then I think about Tuberville's first game against App State, where they had. And I saw T-Rob this spring. I said, do you ever tell guys that the biggest play you made in your Auburn career was as a wide receiver recovering a fumble? He recovered in there at snap. That if he doesn't do that, they probably lose at home in the first game.
Hey, that was and all the things surrounding that. It was Tuberville's first game, and Auburn had been scheduled to play Florida State, Bobby versus Terry game. And then when Terry left, Bobby got mad and said he didn't want to play, and which was fine because Tuberville had already told him if he came, he wasn't playing that game.
Yeah.
So, and by that time, all those things had become known that Tuberville insisted on getting out of that game, and to have done that and then lost to Appalachian State, and Appalachian State then was an FCS team. Just an average FCS team. They weren't like what they became later, and it was a horrible performance. But the ball was bouncing at the 5-yard line, and there was T-Rob was at wide receiver, and the ball was bouncing around the 5-yard line, and there was 2 or 3 App State kids going after it, and T-Rob from wide receiver position just absolutely beats them to the ball and recovers the fumble. And Auburn ended up punting, but then they got the ball back and scored and won the game. But because the game was tied at that
What about you, Philip? What are some of your favorite season
I
openers?
think probably the Oregon game a few years ago, Bo's freshman year, particularly the game-winning play and really the game-winning drive because, they had a fourth down play on that drive, and Bo just fourth and short. I don't remember if it was one or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But Bo just willed himself to the first down marker. I mean, he had to fight to get there, and that would be one. The Texas game you mentioned. I remember about that Texas game is that Texas players were quoted saying that it didn't seem like the week before that it didn't seem like Auburn's receivers were that fast. And after the game, I said, they said our receivers weren't that fast. It looked to me like they were too fast for them. And but that game, sometimes I get back. It wasn't because of the game itself, but the introduction of Rudy Johnson against Wyoming.
Yep,
and
2000.
When you saw him doing what he did, which was run the ball over and over again and be far better in the fourth quarter than he was in the first quarter. That's few of them. Most of them have been uneventful because most of them haven't been. Of course, we all remember the quarterback rotation against Clemson in a game they could have won against the number 2 team in the country. They lost 19-13. And
yeah, I think mostly it's been individual things when I think about it. I think about Alexander Wright against Pacific, where he had them.
I remember they Pacific, I believe it was 55-0.
Yeah.
And Auburn threw an 80-yard or so touchdown pass to Alexander Wright, I think on the first play of the game, but it may not have been. And then I think on the first series of the third quarter, they threw another long touchdown pass. Well, I had talked, we did these kinds of things then, to a safety from Pacific the week before the game. And so I went to their locker room and I asked him, I said, "What'd you think of Alexander Wright?" And he said, "I thought he was fast as expletive." But I think my main memory of Walt Harris was their coach. And after the game, he said, "I'll tell you this." He said, my players would like to go out there and play again right now. Based on the ones I talked to in the locker room, I didn't see a lot of interest.
Not the case.
Yeah, that Clemson game was my first game as a student at Auburn. That was my very first one. And that, I hold that game in a special place for that reason. I remember it was either 8 p.m. or 8:30 p.m. Central kickoff. I mean, it was a really late kickoff. Orange Out Stadium. Everybody knew that I think if they had just kept Sean White in the whole game, then they probably would have ended up winning. And they still, if I recall correctly, threw a Hail Mary that they could have won the game on the last play. They were still in a position to do it.
Yeah, they were. And John Franklin basically threw a pass shorter than he should have, and the clock ran out, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
But,
Crazy
I
game.
remember 2010 first game, they beat Arkansas State, I think, 52-26. But what I remember is I guess you'd call it a scramble. Cam went back to pass, and it kind of just opened up, and you saw his speed. He ran about 70 yards for a touchdown, just outran everybody. That was kind of because the spring Cam hadn't really been, he'd been okay. He hadn't been.
They didn't run him at all, and that was the first time they went, okay, a little different there, and it changed everything about that team.
Yep. Yeah. Precursor to what people would see later in the year when he would outrun people, sort of surprisingly, in bigger games than that. I was spoiled. My first 2 years covering the team was 2018 and 2019. So Boobie Whitlow beating Washington with that big drive at the end of the game. I think they sacked Jake Browning on 4th down to win that one. I think it was if I remember correctly, true freshman Smoke Monday, I think, sacked Jake Browning to win that game. And then Oregon, I mean, that was all everything. Anything you could want. A true freshman who went, 13 of 32 on the day, Bo did. Yeah. Found it when it mattered.
Mm-hmm.
There at the end.
That Washington game, Kevin Steele told me this. I think there on that sack, I think there was like a minute and something left in the game, and Auburn had scored to take the lead. And he said they absolutely sent everybody. He said, the way I figured it, if we get there, we win the game. If we don't, it's probably a touchdown, and we still got some time to win the game. And
paid off for him.
Yep.
Well, I don't know if we'll see any of those late game antics this time around, but of course, any sort of season opener for any team is extremely exciting. It's been a long off season, but a fun off season, and it's certainly been a really fun preseason the past month or so at practice. And so we are looking forward to Auburn kicking off against Alabama A&M at 6:30 Central Time on ESPN Plus. If you're listening to this, figure out your ESPN Plus ahead of time and what you're going to do about that. Don't be worrying about it at 5:30 or 6 o'clock. You don't want to be doing that. And if you're coming to the game, be safe getting there, and we will see you guys in the stadium. So, Jason and Phillip, thank you guys so much. We hope everybody enjoyed the first edition of the Roundtable of the 2024 season. Thanks again to Patrick for setting up this awesome video. If you guys have been seeing the ticker along the bottom, keeping you locked into the big games this weekend. And so we really enjoyed it, and we will talk to you guys later.